people didn't think he could do it. Well, he's proved them doubters wrong, hasn't he?
Feed the Goat was one of the banners. It's Goat's goals that fed the Premiership dream and have carried them all the way back to the top level. Delighted expressions on all of the faces. Fans and players have had a unique bond. Ian Bishop there, he's a fiction writer, isn't he, in his spare time, and he and his teammates have just written a very happy ending to Manchester City's season.
What a support this club's got. What a support. You know, when they were down there, they still had, what, 28,000? Imagine next year. They will take thousands to every away match.
Well, it's amazing, but in the 4 years that they've been out of the Premiership, they've used some 70 players in their league campaigns, and some found the burden of expectation from these fans just too difficult to cope with. So Joe Royle in his signings has really looked for character as much as ability, and he's managed to mould together a squad that has achieved what would have looked like the impossible when they fell out of the Premiership 4 years ago.
Wonder what the feelings are like. Francis Lee, Mickey
Stewart, who was instrumental in bringing Royle to this club, and no wonder they call him Sir Joe.
Poor old Dennis. No one wants to know Dennis today, as it is. Joe, where are you?
He wanted to do it for these fans. He knows the depth of their love for the club. The crusade back to the Premiership has been achieved. Don't know how much longer he can afford to stay out there so that that normally unruffled appearance stays as such.
He just got his favourite, Rob. You know, he looks absolutely physically shattered, Big Joe. The tie will be off in a minute.
Think back to all those troubled times and the number of managers they went through. Alan Ball, Asa Hartford, Frank Clark, Steve Coppell, Phil Neal. Joe Royle came in.
7th, another narrow miss for them. Bolton up to 6th, right at the end. Birmingham, Barnsley and Ipswich also in the playoffs, and it is Manchester City who will join Charlton in the Premiership next season. Now there's plenty more.
Those involved in the violence then turned on the police. Officers who were there said they had never seen anything this bad before. 47 police were injured, one had a broken leg, another a broken arm. 26 police horses were hurt, one of them seriously. The police are now taking legal advice on whether to sue Millwall Football Club for compensation.
This is absolutely unacceptable. We have a situation in which for an hour and 10 minutes, the football fans of Millwall decided to attack the police. The Birmingham fans were all locked inside the ground, and they were not involved.
The trouble lasted more than an hour. Police say cars were burned and local residents terrorised. They believe all involved were Millwall fans. The club itself said it was saddened by these events, and anyone caught misbehaving would be banned for life. Margaret Gilmore, BBC News.
The missing schoolgirl.
Helen Callahan reports.
For more than an hour, mounted police pushed back hundreds of Millwall fans who'd left the ground early. Time after time, they were pelted with missiles. 47 officers were injured, 6 went to hospital. Many said it was among the worst violence they'd ever experienced, and the police are now taking legal advice on whether to sue Millwall Football Club for compensation.
This is absolutely unacceptable.
Clearing up the mess, the fans even attacked Millwall supporters' cars.
They was all coming down, throwing bricks everywhere. They were just flying. There was bottles with, they'd made up these bomb things. There was flares, there was fireworks, everything. The cars were all getting smashed to pieces by bricks. They were smashing them in the road to break them up, so they was easier for them to throw.
The police believe all involved were Millwall fans. The club says anyone who was involved in the attacks will be banned from Millwall games for life. If legal action does go ahead, it'll be the first time any police force has sued a football club. The police say the compensation wouldn't be just for them, it'd also go towards rebuilding the local community. Helen Callahan, BBC News.
Some of the devastation that last night's trouble caused. This car was set alight by flares and fireworks. It was so severe that it actually melted the traffic lights, which has been causing huge amounts of traffic chaos in the area all of today. Well, it's the 5th time this season there's been trouble here, and obviously it's raised great concerns in the local community. With me is Councillor Graham Neal. You actually won your seat last night in the local elections, and you were canvassing in the area when it happened.
I was canvassing here, it was about 8:45 last night, knocking on doors, asking people to get out and vote. I was actually talking to people because there was a match going on as I was canvassing. A lot of local people are football fans, a lot of people are Millwall fans. And they're just really disappointed that, again, a small minority of people who aren't here for the football, who aren't here to enjoy the sport, have caused trouble, you know, cause these problems.
Do you think Millwall as a club should be doing more to prevent this kind of thing?
Millwall actually working very closely with the local councils. One of my predecessors, Beverly Bassam, has been working to make it easier for away supporters to come straight from the train station down to the Den, so that the police don't have a problem of crowds coming through the estate. So Millwall actually working very hard with us to try and make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen. It's just a real shame that this has happened.
Councillor Neal, thank you very much. And the club have said this afternoon they do feel morally responsible, but they feel that football hooliganism is a problem of societies, and really that it's not up to them to actually try and solve this problem.
Lucy, thanks very much indeed. There does need to be some sort of action which people will understand. So I think pursuing action in this way does make a lot of sense. And I'd personally be wanting to hear the Millwall directors and management condemning the actions of some of their fans and agreeing to work with the police to try and combat this sort of behaviour.
We have heard from them today. They say it would be unfair to target them as a club. They've done a lot to improve their image, and this is society's problem.
Well, they may have done a lot to improve their image, and I'm sure that this is an improvement on what's happened before. But let's be quite clear, this was appalling. It was completely over the top. There were some very serious injuries sustained by police officers and indeed by the horses. I think that they should be being a little bit more robust. You know, this is not society's fault. This is the fault of the individuals concerned, and perhaps they ought to be taught some lessons in terms of the football club that they allegedly support.
But in terms of how we solve this, Tony Banks was on our programme only about half an hour ago. He said we have some of the toughest laws on football hooligans. The answer is to identify the people, prosecute them in the court. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely, and then when they're prosecuted, there should be a consequence in terms of the team in which they support, and they should be banned from supporting that team and attending the matches.
It would be, though, an interesting departure, wouldn't it, to sue a company or a club for the costs of the operations. We saw, for example, on Wednesday, those May Day operations. The cost of that to the police must have been huge. 6,000 police officers. You could have put that...
Football club, after what it says is the worst street violence London has seen for more than a decade. Nearly 1,000 fans turned on the police after last night's First Division playoff semi-final in South London. 47 officers were injured from a sustained assault as paving slabs, bricks and bottles were hurled through the air. And 26 of the 34 horses on duty were hurt. On the eve of the FA Cup final, the police have demanded the Football Authorities act to end the violence. Here's Margaret Gilmore.
This is the legacy of the violence. Today, the clearing up, the costing and the soul-searching. Dozens of residents were caught up in the thick of things. One woman dragged from her car.
As I went to get out of my car, that was it. My car was just bricked and things just flying from all sorts of angles, and I came back close.
For 2 hours last night, residents trapped in their homes close to the Millwall ground were terrorised. Between 600 and 900 frustrated fans fought raging battles with police.
Come on! Shoot you! We're ahead of the horses!
The rioters had secretly stockpiled missiles and flares. They were deeply disappointed their team had lost the match and thus the last chance of promotion. Their target was the Birmingham fans, but they were kept apart and turned instead on the police.
This is absolutely unacceptable.
First time there's been trouble. Millwall has a history. In fact, this is the 5th time this season there's been trouble. Last night's albeit the worst. It's symptomatic of a wider problem in football. The BBC has been secretly filming hardcore Millwall fans for months. This happened after the match against Wolves recently. Then, as last night, police believe the trouble was planned in advance. One reformed hooligan supports official statistics which show orchestrated violence is increasing.
Now it seems to be getting back up to big firms again. Bigger numbers coming out, more people getting involved.
This happened after Millwall played Nottingham Forest last October. Tonight the club said it regretted the violence, adding it was a problem for our whole society, though the chairman wouldn't be drawn further. This evening, police showed some of the 26 injured horses and said criminal gangs were now being drawn towards football violence. Margaret Gilmore, BBC News, Millwall.
What happened here at Millwall was almost off the scale in terms of even police expectations, but certainly there is still trouble in other grounds. Only on Wednesday night, the day before, in Cardiff, police were having to deal with up to 600 Cardiff fans, trying to keep them apart from Stoke City fans after their club had seen their promotion hopes disappear for this season. And in fact, Cardiff City have 106 fans who are under banning orders. Stoke City, some 97, far more than here at Millwall. So clearly it's not just an isolated one club case, one club problem, but nor, I would say, Fiona, is it nationwide.
And David, Millwall were on the verge of going to the Premiership last night. Are the club and the authorities really serious about reining these people in?
Well, I think they're very worried about it, and in terms of reining in, what they can do with the club is if there's trouble in the ground, the FA can say, right, we're going to deduct you points or we're going to fine you. But the thing that the police are finding is that more and more these violent incidents are taking place further away from the ground. That makes it much harder, in particular, for the footballing authorities to assert any control over the clubs.
OK, David, thanks.
Under a hail of bricks and stones, mounted police charge a crowd of hooligans, filmed by a colleague. From the air, footage from another police cameraman reveals the sheer scale of the violence. Up to 600 football fans scatter as officers push forward. Scotland Yard says this was a pre-planned assault. The trouble after Millwall's Division 1 playoff left 47 officers injured. Their superiors may now sue the club for compensation.
We will be calling Millwall a
defeat. But the Birmingham fans were still locked in the ground, so the police lines became the acceptable target.
Scotland Yard is outraged by what is...
Like that. I was all singing that song, no one likes us because we're Millwall, and all that.
Much of the ammunition for last night's riot came from this children's playground. Bricks ripped from the wall, paving stones ripped out of the ground. And then there were these. Homemade firecrackers thrown at the police. This perhaps is evidence of some sort of planning.
In fact, police are convinced it was orchestrated. Everyone entering the ground for the match was searched, so the flares and the homemade firecrackers, they believe, were stockpiled in vehicles outside the ground. But the club disputes just how far it should be held responsible.
I don't believe that what happened out there is a Millwall Football Club problem. I don't believe that it's a football problem. I do believe that it's a problem that afflicts us as a society at the moment.
No one doubts this First Division club has made an enormous effort to rid itself of its unenviable reputation. This season alone, some 50 or so fans have been prosecuted and subsequently banned for violent behaviour. But the problem is, there appears to be a bottomless pit of hooligans attracted to Millwall FC.
Simon Israel. Now here's Sue Turton with details of some more of today's news.
Men have a fetish for dusky women like me. In their eyes, am I irresistible? I set myself a mission to get in touch with these guys.
So, I'm going to try and find out what's going on in these men's minds. It's investigative journalism, you know, at its best.
Bricks and bottles were hurled through the air, and 26 of the 34 horses on duty were hurt. On the eve of the FA Cup final, the police...
Millwall versus Portsmouth in the First Division. Two clubs with significant hooligan firms. 9 years ago, Millwall moved to a modern all-seater stadium in Bermondsey. Football clubs have gone a long way towards stamping out the violence in the grounds. Mass brawls on the terraces have become a thing of the past. These days, football violence takes a very different form.
I know people that regularly used to go on reconnaissance missions weeks before the away fixture, so that they would know what pubs were there, the layout of the streets around the ground.
Groups travelling to away games, they'd have road maps, like mobile phones, they'd just organise in a different way. They'd send decoys off to send the police off on wrong routes, and then call the other firm and arrange the venue. And there's a great cooperation between two different hooligan firms that want to fight each other.
And often the chosen venue is nowhere near the stadium. By 5 o'clock, the Portsmouth hooligans were in a pub near Waterloo Station, 3 miles from Millwall's ground.
I thought it was 2 Christmas parties coming in, and there was so many guys in the pub at the time. So I started asking a few guys, "Are you from the Christmas party, or who are you?" And they said Portsmouth. So I said, "Oh, there's something going to kick off here." So I seen more people coming in, seen more people on mobile phones, the whole lot, and then I went, there's something going to happen. And then all of a sudden, I heard a charge at the front door, and I turned around and I seen guys just running in the front door over there. You hear lads charging with tables and stools and chairs, but all I could hear was glass smashing. It was just mayhem. I thought it was the end of the world.
You've got ordinary members of the public having just left work, going to the station, and they're watching 100 people fighting in and around a pub. I mean, what's that all about?
Before kick-off, news of the fight near Waterloo Station has spread.
How much are they, mate? £2 each.
Portsmouth fans haven't yet arrived at the ground.
Must be aware of a load of pumping coming down shortly. Is that what's happening? Yeah, kicked off for Waterloo an hour ago. Did it? Yeah. Yeah, chucked it then. Cheers, mate.
Do mate, thank you.
The Lower West stand at the Den, where many of the Millwall hooligans sit. The Portsmouth supporters are kept at a safe distance.
All of you! Fucking lads! We've done you so many times!
There can be a very hostile atmosphere, but I don't think that's unique to Millwall. That is football to a certain extent. You can get a great atmosphere down there when the team are playing well, but people have to appreciate that there is a boundary which they shouldn't cross.
Most of the hooligans would feel that the old days were the best days. Since the influx of like foreign players and all the money that was generated from Sky and the televised games, it's a whole new breed of football fan has been introduced to the game. I mean, the corporate people, families. I mean, it's a sad day when you start getting families and that at football. It never used to be like that. It used to be a male-only thing where you could go away and vent your anger over the weekend, and now it's like kids with, ice creams and funny hats and wigs and stuff like that. In the old days, it was just much more fun. I think the reason you get some of these big firms with the perceived smaller clubs are because they haven't attained success to the level where outside money comes in and corporate investment comes in and ruins the club. And I think that's why you get some of the most violent firms at the old style of clubs.
Millwall win 1-0. In spite of the vicious chanting, there is no violence in the ground. The club has already banned well over 100 troublemakers.
The club are banning them for life, and we're trying to enforce that. The manager and the owner, the chairman, have been in the press and in the local programme saying that if the disorder and the missile throwing carries on, then they would resign.
The trouble that takes place outside the ground goes largely unreported and unseen by the public. The vast majority of Millwall fans go home peacefully, but several hundred hooligans follow their familiar post-match ritual and wait for the Portsmouth fans. While they wait, they abuse black and Asian passers-by.
Black cunt! Trigger! Shoot that nigger! Get down the shot!
Around the corner they find another target.
Postman's car! Postman's car! Set on fire!
There's something wrong with a lot of ya. You ain't no football supporters, you're fucking animals. You don't support. Look, they're kicking people's cars in. People's cars in. They're Millwall supporters' cars. Hope you're getting it. I'm living here with my baby. Have a bit of respect. Imagine if it was outside your fucking mother's house. Imagine it, eh? Was you put up here? No. Sort your fucking selves out.
A Portsmouth supporter has unwisely squeezed through police lines to try and get back to his car. The man was rescued by passers-by and, as far as we know, suffered no serious injury and got home safely. Police have arrested more than 40 people for the violence at Millwall this season. Most of them were between 14 and 18 years old.
Every firm, like any organisation, will have younger guys that want to become involved in that. They basically rise through the ranks. It's an ongoing thing, and that's one of the reasons why it's a very...
England have already qualified for the World Cup, so it's time for another friendly. We learned a month later that all charges against Lenny had been dropped. The football season is nearing its end, and Millwall are still chasing promotion to the Premiership. It's been a long year for Neil McPherson. Millwall's visitors today are Wolves. Among the 4,000 travelling fans, this coach attracts particular attention. It contains Lenny and the Wolves firm. At the last meeting between the sides, 2 of the Wolves firm were stabbed by Millwall hooligans. Today, more than 300 officers are on duty, the biggest police presence of the entire season. A penalty for Millwall in the second half wins the game, and 3 more potentially vital points. The sheer numbers of police prevents any clashes between Millwall and Wolves hooligans. So instead, with depressing predictability, some Millwall supporters attempt to attack the away fans as they're taken to the station. The violence at Millwall has persisted through the season, but the problem is nationwide. This season, there have been more than 50 major incidents of football-related violence around the country. Few clubs can claim to have no hooligan problem.
People who deal with football all the time are well aware that every single week there are many violent incidents that are attributed to football fans. So anyone who thinks that football violence is not alive and flourishing are living with a myth, I'm afraid.
If the FA acknowledge it, the Football League acknowledge it, and the press publish what is really going on, then somebody has to do something about it. And if you're going to do something about it, it's going to cost a lot of money. And that money will have to come from television revenue. And that will be taking money out of the pockets of the clubs and the FA and the Football League. And at the moment, it's not a problem because it's not been reported. And they're getting away with it week in, week out. But we don't have the resources to actually do anything other than just keep the lid on it.
Four weeks later, Millwall lost a playoff match, missing out on promotion to the Premiership. The violence erupted again. Hundreds of hooligans ran riot. Almost 50 officers and 26 horses were injured in what police described as the worst football violence ever seen in London. In the country. Cardiff's season in the second division starts against Wycombe Wanderers. The vast majority of Cardiff supporters are friendly and well behaved, though travelling fans get a fair amount of abuse. After Cardiff take the lead, much of the shouting is directed at the away supporters.
The passion of support is intense. It's something you can't describe. The atmosphere, sometimes people say, is electric, and that is the way it is at Ninian Park. But there's intensity, and there's that point which it moves beyond intensity into hatred, and that, unfortunately, can happen at Cardiff from time to time.
Within hours, some will look for trouble with fans from bigger clubs. Nearby, Cardiff's Millennium Stadium is hosting the Charity Shield match between Manchester United and Liverpool the next day. And some Manchester United fans are already arriving. As Cardiff are still playing, Manchester fans take over one of the Cardiff supporters' pubs. Using hidden cameras, we set out to see what will happen.
Which team are you supporting today?
Cardiff.
No, not Cardiff, mate. It's Man U.
Is it Man U in there?
Yeah.
With Cardiff supporters excluded, United fans are jubilant.
Fellas, you're not going to get a drink in you and you're not going to stand your either, right? It's our pub though, it's our pub, isn't it?
But some local fans don't like it. They're now crowded around another pub, the Borough, just around the corner. Among them are known hooligans, members of Cardiff's Soul Crew. Suddenly, a mob of United fans leave, apparently trying to reach the Cardiff fans. Cardiff run towards them. Police attempt to keep them apart by pinning back the United fans. But Cardiff are now mobbed into one large group.
There's nothing like that indescribable buzz when it's something, it's just about to go off. Unless you've been there and involved in it, it's very difficult to explain and to understand it. It's very difficult to replace.
Let's fucking run up, Carpers! Buddy, come on! Hey, let's make them earn their fucking money!
They charge at the police. their chanting Soul Crew, now believed to be one of the biggest hooligan groups in the country.